Live from New Delhi, you are watching DD India, India's voice to the world. I'm Sakal Bhatt.
I'm Anil Thomas.
And coming up in the next hour, or rather next 2 hours, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's unprecedented visit to Greece, the first by an Indian Prime Minister in 4 decades.
And we also examine how Prime Minister Modi's visit to Greece will help the two civilizations consorts build strategic arc in Eastern Mediterranean region and much more. So let's begin DD India's News Hour special.
On his last leg of a day's visit to Greece, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be addressing the Indian diaspora in a short while from now.
India and Greece upgrade ties to strategic partners in Athens. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi conferred with the Grand Cross of the Order of Honor, symbolizing the solidified partnership.
Russia says Western suggestions that Wagner mercenary boss killed on its orders an absolute lie and declines to definitively confirm his death, citing the need to wait for test results.
Indian Olympic gold medalist javelin thrower Neeraj Chopra qualifies for the men's javelin throw final at the World Athletic Championship, books his ticket for Paris Olympics.
And let's begin with news related to Prime Minister Modi's visit to the Greece. And India and Greece have decided to take their ties to the very next level of strategic partnership, and both countries have also agreed for migration and mobility partnerships.
Well, here's a detailed report on Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Greece visit.
India and Greece have agreed to strengthen the strategic partnership in various areas, including defense, security and agriculture. Addressing the joint press conference with his Greek counterpart, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, in Athens on Friday, PM Modi said India and Greece will soon be having an agreement on migration and mobility partnership.
दोनों देशों के बीच स्किल्ड माइग्रेशन को सुगम बनाने के लिए हमने जल्द ही एक माइग्रेशन एंड मोबिलिटी पार्टनरशिप एग्रीमेंट करने का निर्णय लिया। हमारा मानना है कि अपने प्राचीन पीपल टू पीपल संबंधों को नया रूप देने के लिए हमें सहयोग बढ़ाना चाहिए। हम अपने शिक्षण संस्थानों के बीच सांस्कृतिक और शैक्षणिक आदान प्रदान को बढ़ावा देंगे।
At the joint presser, followed by the bilateral talks, the Indian Prime Minister said that they had a discussion of a mutual cooperation in the area of terrorism and cyber security.
आज हमने आतंकवाद और साइबर सिक्योरिटी के क्षेत्र में आपसी सहयोग पर भी चर्चा की। हमने तय किया कि हमारे राष्ट्रीय सुरक्षा सलाहकारों के स्तर पर भी बातचीत का एक संस्थागत प्लेटफॉर्म होना चाहिए। प्रधानमंत्री जी और मैं सहमत हैं कि हमारा द्विपक्षीय व्यापार तेजी से बढ़ रहा है और आगे भी बढ़ोतरी की अपार संभावनाएं हैं। इसलिए हमने वर्ष 2030 तक अपने द्विपक्षीय व्यापार को 2 गुना करने का लक्ष्य तय किया है।
During the joint press conference, the Greek Prime Minister said that they have decided to take Indo-Greece ties to a level of strategic partnership.
We are very happy to be upgrading our relationship into a strategic relationship. We thus highlight the fact that Greece and India are in reality much closer than their geographical distance, and that they are ready to proceed side by side in dealing with the challenges of our time, especially in a period of upheaval and war in Ukraine, facts which make it even more necessary to respect the UN Charter.
PM Modi also called on the President of Greece, Katerina N. Sakerellaropoulou. During the meeting, PM Modi said the success of Chandrayaan-3 is not only of India alone, but it is a success for the whole of humankind. He said the results of the data collected by the Chandrayaan-3 mission will help the entire scientific fraternity and humankind. PM Modi was also conferred with the Grand Cross of the Order of Honor by the Greek President in Athens. With Meghna Dev, Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also said India has not just demographic power, but our youth are also aspirational.
भारत के पास न केवल डेमोग्राफिक ताकत है, हमारे युवा एस्पिरेशनल है, स्किल हो रहे और साथ साथ मोबाइल भी है। ये एक रेयर कॉम्बिनेशन है जो भारत की अर्थव्यवस्था को ताकत देता है। देश के स्वरूप को बदलने के लिए मेरा मंत्र रहा है रिफॉर्म, परफॉर्म, ट्रांसफॉर्म। हम इसी स्पिरिट से आगे बढ़ रहे हैं।
And Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also said that India's doors are wide open for foreign investment, and digitization efforts, ease of doing business is also increasing continuously.
रेड टेप को हटाकर रेड कारपेट बिछाया जा रहा है। आज भारत के द्वारा विदेशी निवेश के लिए पूरी तरह खुले हैं। रक्षा क्षेत्रों को भी खोला गया है। इसमें को डेवलपमेंट और को प्रोडक्शन की बहुत संभावनाएं हैं। इसके साथ साथ हमारे डिजिटाइजेशन के प्रयासों से ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस भी लगातार बढ़ रहा है। आज के वैश्विक परिप्रेक्ष्य में यह जरूरी है कि हमारी सप्लाई लाइन्स रेजिलिएंट हो और हमारे पार्टनर्स भरोसेमंद हो।
Well, now the focus shifts to Prime Minister Modi's diaspora event in Athens. So Greek students from a Bollywood dance academy in the capital are all set to perform at the Indian diaspora event.
In fact, the students could be dancing to the tunes of Oscar-winning song Natu Natu of India, and Indian Prime Minister Modi will visit Greece. In fact, Indian Prime Minister Modi is already in Greece, and of course, all eyes are set upon the next big-ticket diaspora event. So Natu Natu truly going global?
Well, yes, that is. It's not only filmy numbers. There are also numbers that are of praise, especially the track that we saw, the students rehearsing.
Yes.
It's not a Bollywood track that we look forward to. But yes, surely Bollywood tracks will be a part and parcel of the performance that the students put together there, welcoming the
And in fact, that's one event we must tell our viewers of DD India all across the world who are watching this special broadcast. We will be cutting live to that diaspora event in a short while from now, and also getting your reporter live on that big story. In fact, talking about the diaspora event and the Indian community in Athens, they've also expressed excitement and happiness over Prime Minister Modi's visit to the country. And before we get on to the real diaspora event, let's also quickly take a look at the other stories that we are tracking right now. A quick dip into the other big stories of the day. The Kremlin has said that the Western suggestions that Wagner mercenary boss... Okay, we're going to play that story in a bit from now, but I think we have another story that's coming up next for the viewers. U.S. Ambassador to India, Eric Garcetti, has said that the President Joe Biden loves India and that his visit to New Delhi next month will further the bilateral ties.
He also says that the sale of U.S. jet engines and drones to India will be a game changer. Garcetti spoke to DD India's Ramesh Ramchandran. Take a listen.
You talk to our viewers, if you will, about the forthcoming visit to India by U.S. President Joe Biden. What will be his itinerary be like?
President Biden is so excited to return to India. He's been here many times, but it's his first time as President of the United States. And building on the momentum and the friendship and the deep progress from Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington just 2 months ago, it hasn't let up. In fact, I would say it's accelerated. We've seen superb leadership on G20 from India, not just here in New Delhi, but 60 cities for months ahead of time, which makes the job of national leaders like President Biden easy. Talking about debt, climate, women, technology, the global economy, our safety and security. You will see a lot of progress here. And I think we'll also see bilateral work between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden, building on the opening of 2 new consulates in the future, reducing visa times, looking at getting trade disputes behind us and trade opportunities in front of us. These are the sorts of things I think Indians can expect that will affect everyday Indians in a positive way. But there's no question, President Biden and America loves India. This is our moment.
How quickly can India see the sale of U.S. jet engines and drones to India?
Well, I'm very excited that by the time we go to work on Monday, the period of congressional notification, if there's any objections, will have expired. We haven't seen any objection thus far, and I think that we had Republican and Democratic members of our House of Representatives here to be the honored guests at India's Independence Day at the Red Fort. It shows that India unites us. Sometimes we disagree with each other in the United States. Republicans and Democrats don't always get along. When it comes to India, we really do. And so I'm very optimistic that that will move forward. This exquisite technology, 100% that we control, shared with India, will really be a game changer. And more importantly, a peace secure for India and for the world.
Ambassador, the last time I spoke with you, you told me that 2611 accused Tahavu Rana will be extradited to India by the end of the year. Does that timeline still hold?
I'm optimistic. That will be for a judge to decide, a set of judges to decide. The final arguments will go forward from Rana's attorney in late October. We will respond in early November, but we're clear. Bad guys need to pay the price, and that extradition needs to occur.
And are we looking forward to a visit to India by the U.S. Speaker and the leader of the Democratic Party in the lower chamber of the legislature?
They have both expressed their desire to have a historic visit. Part of that will rely on them resolving any potential budget shutdown, government shutdown.
Ambassador Garcetti, how does the U.S. look at India's singular achievement of landing a craft on the south pole of the moon? I ask you this because, one, it's never been done before, and two, I'm told it's very cost effective. By way of comparison, the Indian moon mission cost $75 million. The Hollywood film Interstellar cost $175 million to make.
It's amazing.
Would this moon mission spur India-US space cooperation going forward?
No question. We used to say the sky's the limit. I think after this week, the sky's no longer the limit. I'm so happy for India. I celebrated. I was in a room full of Indians when that happened. And it reminded me of my childhood, watching the space shuttle go up for the first time, seeing, those moments are ones you remember the rest of your life. And it's so impressive that India has done this in the face of adversity, coming back and back again, doing it inexpensively and efficiently. I think it augurs incredibly well, and we can't wait to put an Indian astronaut in space on a mission next year, as we announced in June. So that'll be the next big threshold and an example of how our relationship has no limits.
And finally, Ambassador Garcetti, we are meeting in the immediate aftermath of the BRICS summit in South Africa. How does the U.S. view the outcome from that summit? Also, would D.C. welcome the inclusion of Iran and Saudi Arabia in BRICS?
That's up for the BRICS nations to decide, and we support, obviously, multilateral institutions everywhere. We hope that they will always engage in the same principles that we uphold, whether it's at the United Nations or whether it's at G20, that certain rules keep the peace, certain rules ensure our mutual prosperity, that we should not set up groups that are about what you're against or who you're against. This idea that there's the West and the rest just isn't true. Look at India and the United States. Friendships are formed east-west, north-south, and when we do form those friendships, those are the ones that can change the world in the deepest way possible.
Well, back home, the two-day Jaipur G20 Trade and Investment Ministers meeting ended on a positive note on Friday. The outcome document largely speaks about trade and investment for resilient global value chains and integrating the MSMEs, which mean micro, small and medium enterprises in global trade with a focus on paperless economy. DD India's Vishal Baristo has more.
The members of the G20 group and 10 invited nations, while deliberating upon the reforms in the World Trade Organization, broadly agreed upon 3 points. This includes generic framework for mapping global value chains, integrating the MSMEs, and digitalization of trade documents.
In the first annexure, we talk of a G20 generic framework for mapping global value chains. These are high-level principles on which we will be mapping global value chains. The second annexure, friends, is an annexure which addresses our micro, small and medium enterprises. The third annexure, friends, relates to high-level principles on digitalization of trade documents.
This was the first time that the Middle East had a fairly large representation. It included UAE, Egypt, and Oman as invited countries in G20.
The Indian presidency invited several Middle Eastern countries to join the WTO meetings. While, of course, Saudi Arabia is a member already, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is a member of the G20. Prime Minister Narendra Modi invited 3 more countries, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt, to join as invited countries. It's for the first time that 4 countries from this region are a part of the G20 deliberations.
The geopolitical issues, including the Ukraine war, were discussed at length. Due to disruptions in supply chain caused by the war, the G20 nations also agreed to collaborate on building a resilient logistics sector. But for India and the developing world, the MSME is the future.
The Jaipur call talks about integration of MSMEs in global trade, but this is not all. Paperless economy and also reviving the global value chains have been the focus of this meet here in Jaipur. As the minister says, it is going to serve a long way, not only for the Indian economy, but also for Global South. With cameraman Mohit in Jaipur, this is Vishal Baristo for DD India.
And shifting focus to the other big story, well, after the successful soft landing of India's lunar mission Chandrayaan-3 on the moon, ISRO chairman S. Somnath has said that there is a high possibility of actually finding various scientific outcomes, including understanding of the atmosphere, which is evident there.
See, it's a scientific accomplishment. Landing on the southern side of the moon, being first itself is a record. Now, next is that it is going to South Pole with a specific scientific objective. That it is a less explored area. There is a high possibility of finding various scientific outcomes, including the understanding of the regolith as well as a thin atmosphere, which is much more evident there. So we are looking at all of that.
Well, further, he also said that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is an inspiration for everyone at ISRO. Take a listen.
Yes, he himself is an inspiration for the entire country. So having him here creates such an air of enthusiasm and pride in each of us for our work, and makes us to do much more for the nation. I think that's precisely the reason that we want to derive it out of this visit. He is expected, then we will be very happy to showcase what we are doing, and we'll also request him what he wants to speak to us in terms of our future plan of space, etc., how it evolves, because he will definitely, his vision should be shared with us so that we work for the nation.
And it's time to slip into a very short break here. We'll be back with more on the other side. Stay with us.
Namaste land.
Marhaban ila al-Hind.
Zari India.
Salam India.
Namaste India.
Namaskar Bharata.
Muy
India.
Nahnu hunud.
India.
Ma Hindi hasti.
Hindian.
Salam Hindustan.
We are India.
$20,000
ओके
दोनों
नो नो 10 का एक
इतना कैश नहीं है
कोई बात नहीं हम यूपीआई भी लेते हैं
मेरा पेमेंट ऐप अलग है
कहीं जूते वापस मिलने की जगह जूते पड़ ना जाए ऐप दूसरा हो या तीसरा चाहिए बस यूपीआई आपका मोबाइल नंबर ही बन सकता है आपका यूपीआई नंबर और अब किसी भी पेमेंट ऐप से कोई भी पेमेंट ऐप पर यूपीआई चलेगा
Welcome to Jaipur.
Your name, Ina Krishnamurti.
Yes.
It sounds so much like an Indian name.
My grandfather fascinated with Mahabharata, Ramayana stories, so he gave my father's name Krishnamurti.
The handing over of the gavel by Indonesian President in Bali to Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Of course, it's a fascinating, memorable history.
What does Indonesia think is the biggest challenge in the Indo-Pacific?
We don't want this region to be part of any conflict, not unilateral actions.
How does Indonesia see the Quad partnership?
We see it as a plus.
We are taking up the theme of the BRICS grouping, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, its expansion, the implications of its expansion, and also the future of the BRICS grouping where India has played a prominent role.
I'm sure that all these countries are also happy that they have now been invited to BRICS, and India has played a very key role in making sure that the expansion of BRICS is a systematic, orderly process based on criteria. This has been, I think, a singular role that India has played, and everyone recognizes this.
Your name, Ina Krishnamurti. Yes. It sounds so much like an Indian name.
My grandfather fascinated with Mahabharata, Ramayana stories, so he gave My father's name, Krishnamurti.
The handing over of the gavel by Indonesian President in Bali to Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Of course, it's a fascinating, memorable history.
What does Indonesia think is the biggest challenge in the Indo-Pacific?
We don't want this region to be part of any conflict, not unilateral actions.
How does Indonesia see the Quad partnership?
We see it as a plus.
Well, you're watching New Delhi Live. This is DD India and Special News Hour.
Well, the Indian Space Research Organization, that's ISRO, has started the activities for the ongoing Chandrayaan-3 mission as per the schedule, and all systems are functioning normally. ISRO has released a new video of the moon's surface.
In fact, the video showcases how the Chandrayaan-3 rover ramped down from the lander to the lunar surface.
Well, several components led to the success of Chandrayaan-3 landing on the moon.
And one of them is the Central Tool Room and Training Center in Bhubaneswar in the East Indian state of Orissa.
Well, the center developed more than 15,000 tools and precision components of the Chandrayaan-3 lander, rover and the spacecraft.
In fact, the organization has also reportedly completed 80% of equipment manufacturing for Indian Space Research Organization's Gaganyaan mission, which is scheduled for 2024.
We are able to in a position to supply more than 50,000 components for Chandrayaan-3. This particular project, it took more than 2 years. And total my team is involved in Bhubaneswar center is around 150 people. And another 45 of my colleagues who have been stationed in ISRO Bangalore. I really thank entire my team who have been working by 24/7 from last 2 years to make this critical components for especially for spacecraft as well as for the lander and rover also.
Let's just shift our focus to Russia-Ukraine war, and the latest that we can pick from Ukraine is that the Ukraine's 73rd Naval Center of Special Operations have released this footage on Friday, purportedly showing its soldiers in combat, and this is around the embattled village of Robotyne.
Well, Ukrainian forces have raised the national flag in the settlement of Robotyne in the southern Zaporozhye region. The Institute for the Study of War, an American research group and think tank, has described the Ukrainian advances on Robotyne as tactically significant.
Advancing in the area could enable Ukrainian forces to begin operating beyond the most densest or the dense region of the Russian minefields that have held up the counteroffensive launched in early June. In fact, yesterday, Ukraine also celebrated their Independence Day.
Well, moving on to Russia, the Kremlin has said that Western suggestions that Wagner mercenary boss Yevgeny Prigozhin has been killed on its orders were an absolute lie and declined to definitely confirm his death, citing the need to wait for test results.
In fact, President Vladimir Putin on Thursday sent his condolences to Prigozhin's family, breaking his silence after the mercenary leader's plane crashed reportedly on Wednesday evening, with no survivors on board 2 months after he led a mutiny against army chiefs. And in fact, Putin cited preliminary information as indicating that Prigozhin and his top associate in the Wagner mercenary group had been killed.
Well, Russian investigators have opened a probe into what happened, but have not yet said what they suspect caused the plane to suddenly fall from the sky northwest of Moscow.
In fact, they have officially confirmed that the identities of the 10 bodies recovered from the wreckage.
Well, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan in Kyiv on Friday and discussed the Black Sea grain export deal that Russia quit last month.
And remember, the deal brokered by Turkey and the United Nations had allowed the safe Black Sea export of Ukrainian grain. Ankara has been trying to persuade Moscow to return to the agreement.
Well, shifting focus to Donald Trump, where Donald Trump's mugshot was released on Thursday evening after he was booked at an Atlanta jail for more than a dozen felony charges as part of a wide-ranging criminal case stemming from the former U.S. president's attempt to overturn his 2020 election defeat in Georgia.
Brow furrowed, jaw clenched, Donald Trump appeared in his first ever mugshot Thursday. This came after he was booked on over a dozen felony counts at an Atlanta jail over attempts to overturn his 2020 presidential election defeat in Georgia. He wasted no time trying to turn it to his advantage. The image is now on his campaign website above a message asking for donations. He also posted the photo on X, formerly known as Twitter. The post appears to be his first on the social media site since his account was banned after the Capitol Hill riots on January 6th. The ex-US president, who is running for re-election in 2024, surrendered to Fulton County Jail on Thursday. He's part of a sprawling 19-person indictment that alleges violation of state racketeering laws, conspiracy, and false statements. Trump supporters arrived outside the jail to show their love for the former president, while other demonstrators urged that he be locked up. Trump agreed to post a $200,000 bond and accepted bail conditions that would bar him from threatening witnesses or his co-defendants. Before boarding his private plane at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport to go back to New Jersey, he repeated his claim that the prosecution for the Georgia case, along with other cases he faces, are politically motivated.
What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. And everybody knows it. I've never had such support. And that goes with the other ones, too. What they're doing is election interference. They're trying to interfere with an election. There's never been anything like it in our country before.
It's Trump's fourth indictment since leaving office, and he's the first former U.S. president to face criminal charges, even as he mounts another campaign for the White House in next year's elections. It appears that far from damaging his candidacy for the Republican Party nomination, however, the 4 cases filed against him have only bolstered his standing. He leads the Republican race to challenge Democratic President Joe Biden in the November 2024 election.
Well, Elon Musk has taken to Twitter to repost that, and he said, next level, the tweet that he took from Donald Trump.
Reactions continue to pour in, and in fact, getting you more news now. Indian-American entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy's popularity rating and online fundraising surged on Thursday, a day after his maiden Republican presidential debate. Now, these debates are also getting a lot of traction.
Well, Ramaswamy is running for the United States presidential polls next year. And according to Ramaswamy's campaign, he's raised over $450,000 in the first hour after the debate.
In fact, the Indian-American entrepreneur turned politician was up against 3 of his top rivals. Now, who are these top rivals? Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, former Vice President Mike Pence, and South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley.
Well, shifting focus now to Niger and the suspense around it. Now, Niger has authorized Mali and Burkina Faso's military forces to intervene on its territory in the event of an attack.
This authorization hints that the junta in Niger intends to continue defying regional calls to step down after last month's coup. The 3 allies' foreign ministers said they had met in the Nigerian capital, Niamey, to discuss boosting cooperation on security and other joint issues on Thursday.
The West African bloc, ECOWAS, was warned that it was ready to send troops into Niger to restore constitutional order if diplomatic efforts fail.
And DD India's Tise Mekende sends us this report from Horse.
And at the moment, President of Nigeria, who pretends to a very great extent, talking about ECOWAS, says they are still open to peace talks and negotiation. Just yesterday, he had a delegation, or he met rather, with a team of Islamic clerics who he had sent to mediate and, interact with the military junta on ways forward, without the use of force. He had a deliberation with them yesterday, and as far as Tinubu is concerned, they are still checking out. They are still open, to negotiation talks,
with war and, the deployment of troops being a last resort. So the collaboration of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso all together, putting together their forces ready should there be an intervention from ECOWAS. I don't really think it would deter ECOWAS, other members of ECOWAS, talking about Nigeria, Ghana, and other countries who are really in support of the return to constitutional democracy in Niger Republic. That's their stand. I don't think will be so much of a deterrent, because looking at military might, for instance, putting the military mights of Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso all together, they don't amount to anything numerically compared to what maybe a Nigeria alone would put in together. So, yes, I don't think it will amount to so much of a deterrent to ECOWAS.
Well, the top UN humanitarian official, Martin Griffiths, on Friday voiced concern about the spread of violence in Sudan and said a lasting conflict could tip the entire region into humanitarian catastrophe.
Griffiths spokesman Jens Likar said, and I quote, "War and hunger could consume Sudan," unquote. He also warned that hundreds of thousands of malnourished children could die if they do not receive treatment. Diseases such as measles, malaria, dengue fever, and acute watery diarrhea are spreading, Liark added.
Well, Japanese Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi talks with the International Atomic Energy Agency, that's IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi, in a video conference on Friday.
And this meeting comes after Japan started releasing treated radioactive water from Fukushima nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean on Thursday. The foreign minister assured that Japan would ensure the safety at the international front.
We will continue to take all possible measures to ensure its safety. So we will also ensure, with the IAEA's continued involvement, that the discharge that adversely affect human health or environment would never happen.
First of all, let me congratulate you. I think the fact that the process has started smoothly, and the cooperation between the Japanese government and TEPCO, METI, and the IAEA has been smooth is quite remarkable. So it's the first step.
Well, time now for us to slip into a breather here. On the other side, we'll tell you why Australia is having a military drill with Philippines.
On the other side, stay with us.
We are taking up the theme of the BRICS grouping, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, its expansion, the implications of its expansion, and also the future of the BRICS grouping, where India has played a prominent role.
I'm sure that all these countries are also happy that they have now been invited to BRICS, and India has played a very key role in making sure that the expansion of BRICS is a systematic, orderly process based on criteria. This has been, I think, a singular role that India has played, and everyone recognizes this.
Your name, Ina Krishnamurthy,
Yes.
it sounds so much like an Indian name.
My grandfather fascinated with Mahabharata, Ramayana stories, so he gave my father's name Krishnamurthy.
The handing over of the gavel by Indonesian President in Bali to Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Of course, it's a fascinating, memorable history.
What does Indonesia think is the biggest challenge in the Indo-Pacific?
We don't want this region to be part of any conflict, not unilateral actions.
How does Indonesia see the Quad partnership?
We see it as a plus.
Namaste India.
Namaste land. Marhaban ila al-Hind.
Zari India. Salam India. Namaste India.
Namaskar Bharata.
Mui
Nous
India.
sommes land. نحن هنود.
India.
Ma Hindi hasti.
Mung Hindian.
Salam Hindustan.
We are India.
Welcome to Jaipur.
You're watching live from New Delhi on DD India News Hour special broadcast. Moving on to some more stories. Now, Australia's Defence Minister Richard Marles has said that Australia has a security interest in the South China Sea and it will work more closely with the Philippines on joint patrols.
Well, Australia's Defence Minister's comments came as he observed military exercises in the Philippines. More than 2,000 Australians and Philippine defence personnel are participating in the amphibious landing and air assault drills with two Australian Navy vessels, HMAS Canberra and HMAS Anzac. They are conducting several bilateral exercises with the Philippine Navy.
The joint exercises, which is a first for the two nations, come amid renewed tensions between the Philippines and China in the South China Sea.
While Greek firefighters continue to battle a blaze spreading outside Athens.
And over 200 firefighters with 65 vehicles, 2 aircrafts and 5 helicopters are working to douse over 100 wildfires. And the government has also faced a lot of criticism for its response to the situation.
In Canada, firefighting operations are in full swing in British Columbia. Over 50,000 people were forced to evacuate their homes.
And as emergency teams try and stop the spread of flames by digging trenches and water bombing the impacted area.
U.S. Weather Department officials issued a red flag warning for wildfires in the Pacific Northwestern state of Oregon.
It means that certain weather conditions may fuel the risk of fire. Satellite images shows smoke from Oregon's wildfires near Portland.
Well, this summer has seen record-breaking temperatures across the globe. In some places in the United States, the heat has lingered above 40 degrees Celsius for weeks on end.
And it's not just bad for the body. Now, researchers are increasingly showing that the rising temperatures are bad for the mind as well, with society's most vulnerable at the highest risk. In fact, DD India's Tony Waterman has more from Austin in Texas.
It's been 4 years since Alvin Pimpkin has had a roof over his head. Right now, a mattress behind a grocery store is home.
The weather sure is hot out here.
And while living on the streets is never easy, excessively long heat spells this summer has made it unbearable, both emotionally and physically.
I have sores on my feet.
On the day we spoke, it was the 40th day in a row of temperatures over 38 degrees Celsius.
The heat does drain you in like Like, I think it does cause an effect on my attitude, and I have anger issues at times, and then depression issues, and it does cause that to be more severe.
Research on the effects of long-term exposure to extreme heat is still in the early stages, but accumulating evidence shows it is linked to an increase in violence, aggression, psychiatric hospitalizations, even suicide.
And this sounds trivial, but it's not. Heat makes us cranky. You can't deal with your own emotions perhaps as calmly as you could if you were cooler. So you see more serious impacts on mental health for people who have had multiple experiences of, again, climate extremes.
This compounding effect can be exceptionally detrimental to the nearly 600,000 homeless people in the United States, more than half of them concentrated in states prone to extreme weather, and about a third of whom are already suffering from some form of mental illness.
They may or may not be getting treatment for that, but there is evidence that certainly some of the psychoactive drugs you might take to cope with mental illness actually have the effect of making you more vulnerable to heat.
For Alvin Pimpkin, the heat is now an inescapable enemy, one he believes will ultimately shorten his life.
If it's affecting you in the now, then chances are it's affecting you all the way around throughout your life in a negative way.
Scientists say the intensity, frequency, and longevity of this year's summer heat is just a snapshot of the future. And while more research is needed to understand the relationship between extreme heat and mental well-being, one thing is already abundantly clear. Climate change is impacting not just our environments, but our minds as well. Tony Waterman in Austin, Texas, reporting for DD India.
In fact, protests have broken out on the streets of Argentina's Buenos Aires on Thursday, and there are growing calls for the government to take an action to address the economic crisis ahead of the upcoming elections in October. Argentina is suffering from soaring inflation, where figures have reached 103%.
Well, US bank JP Morgan estimates that inflation could surge to 190% by the end of the year.
Shifting focus to Venezuela, where the National Assembly has elected Elvis Amoroso as the new head of the National Electoral Council. Amoroso has previously acted as the South American country's Comptroller General, who looked after public funds. Naming Elvis Amoroso as the head of the electoral body comes after the United States proposed easing sanctions against the country if President Nicolas Maduro worked towards conducting free and fair elections.
Well, the Panama Canal is planning to continue transit restrictions through the vital shipping route for at least 10 more months. The move comes as an ongoing drought in the region has significantly lowered the water level through this vital passage connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. The decision has caused a backlog of cargo vessels waiting to pass, and the restrictions on daily transit numbers will give time for the canal to preserve water until the end of the next rainy season.
Minimum between the next 10 or 12 months ahead, both the water depth and the reduction of the daily quota will be maintained. There are two important aspects of this measure. We are not impacting the Panamax water depth but only the quota. For the Neo Panamax, we are only impacting the water depth but not the quota.
Estamos impactando es el calado y no el número de cupos.
Well, now to get a perspective on what exactly the Prime Minister's visit that he's had to the Mediterranean country of Greece, what does that mean for India? What does that mean for Greece? We've got a long history, long civilization that we all talk about, but what on ground zero does this visit by Prime Minister Modi mean for the two countries? Joining us this evening is an esteemed guest, Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan, former Indian ambassador to Greece, joining us to take this deliberation forward. Good evening, sir. Welcome to the studios.
Thank you for having me.
First, how does one look at this visit and some of the big outcomes, or your opening thoughts on the Prime Minister's visit to Greece?
Well, I think it's a long overdue visit, and coming after 40 years, I think it's very long overdue. Given the fact that Greece has always been on our side in many important issues, like supporting our candidacy for the Security Council, permanent membership, and understanding our position on Kashmir and all kinds of international issues. and also being an fairly important member of the EU. I'm not saying the most important, but and located in a strategic part of the Mediterranean, it is somewhat surprising that, the visit of Indian Prime Minister has taken place after so long.
40 years.
But it's welcome. I think it's long overdue, and I think it will give a big boost to the relationship.
Quoting their head of the state, he's called Athens, New Delhi's gateway to Europe. So in that perspective, and also the Russia-Ukraine conflict, because this also came up in the discussion, and the NATO angle to it, how do you look at it?
Well, Greece is a member of the European Union. So to a large extent, it has to align its stand on the Russia-Ukraine conflict with what the EU's policy is. However, there is a good, Greece and Russia have always had a kind of special relationship because of the Orthodox Church, which is a common factor. And
Sir, I'll ask you to hold your thoughts at this point of time. Let's cut across live. The Indian Prime Minister all ready to address the Indian diaspora.